Hello, everyone. So today, our guest for the New York Dozen Innovation Quarantine Talk is amazing trombonist from New York City, David Whitwell. David Whitwell was the judge of the last year Chopin and Friends Festival composition competition, New Vision. He was judge of the trombone section. So today we have a pleasure that he will share with us his time during this pandemic situation last year, also about his recent projects, also about, he will share his opinions about the trombone and his ideas about the new music for the trombone. I just want to mention that David is a classical trombonist, but also a jazz improviser. He graduated from New York, from the City University of Brooklyn College also, and Manhattan School of Music. And he is currently actually based here, and he is doing a lot of projects also with ensembles. He's also sometimes performing with singing because he's also a singer and the trombonist. So hello, David. So nice to see you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Now, where are you now?
We just moved to the lovely seaside in Norwalk, Connecticut.
Great, beautiful.
So we finally bought something and we can stop renting. So that's big plus.
That's a great, congratulations for that. You know, there's a big festival going there during the summer.
Oh yeah. I'm not really plugged in with everything that's going on here. There's a symphony here. I know the conductor a little bit, but I gotta get plugged in around here a little bit. But I'm only 40 minutes from Manhattan, so it's
okay.
It's no real change. So
I know, but it's a very nice neighborhood, you know. So
yeah. It's exciting, yeah.
So David, how have you been for the last year? Tell me about your time during quarantine, about this life as a trombonist in the big city. So can you say a few things?
Yeah, it's been it was a really big roller coaster the last year. I mean, financially and artistically, things have gone up and down in extremely dramatic ways over the last year. So like every other person who plays music for a living, obviously, went through a really, really kind of blue time, really down, really sad time, last spring and summer. And then, as we kind of adjusted to the way things had to be for a little while, things got a little better, and now things seem to be opening up a little bit. The gigs are coming back, the work's coming back a little bit. I do a lot of international gigs, so I just did a big solo recital in Italy. That felt really, really good to get on a plane and go and play a show.
That was your first concert, right? After such a long time. Where it was and where?
So I did a solo recital for countertenor singing and trombone, sort of in combination, on the Puccini Chamber Opera Festival in Lucca, Italy, with wonderful composers and great ensemble that I worked with out there. And it came off really well. It was a super challenging show. It was a really, really crazy, difficult way to jump right back into solo performing. Because it was about an hour and 10 minutes of music, of really technical, difficult singing and playing. And there was also costumes and staging and just a lot of moving parts. It was really difficult, but it came off pretty well. And we're going to do the show again in Paraguay next year. And I think we're going to do it again a third time in Monterrey, Mexico, with one of our fellow judges, I think. I'm not sure.
Oh, with Eduardo.
Possibly. I think we're talking with Eduardo. I'm not in charge of it. The other guys are in charge of it.
Eduardo.
And yeah, it was sort of like a real launch to sort of a more of a singing career. So now I'm adding. I wouldn't say I'm shifting my performance method. I would say I'm adding countertenor singing and countertenor repertoire to my performing sort of capabilities, and that's really exciting. It's put a lot of new energy into what I do. And you do something for so long, it can get a little stagnant, but all of a sudden everything feels new again with this new this new way of performing. So.
But David, I have a question regarding the opera, because opera was probably with the chamber group, it was not with the orchestra. So how did it work? Did composer write a new pieces specially for you for this for the voice and trombone? And how long were the operas? And they were in English, Italian? Tell a bit about that.
Right. So initially, so this project was scheduled to happen in 2020, and then for obvious reasons, it didn't happen. Back then, it was supposed to happen in this wonderful Baroque theater. It's actually the theater that Puccini worked in and premiered a ton of his operas. However, that got canceled, and the forces back then were it was supposed to be full chamber orchestra with me as the soloist. So these are all pieces that are written specifically for me to play and sing sort of back and forth. So it gives a lot of really interesting compositional opportunities to have a very high male voice and a very low trombone sound sort of back to back coming from the same performer. So that develops kind of an interest. So the first piece was by a wonderful Paraguayan composer. He's the conductor of the Orchestra of the Congress of Paraguay, as well as a fantastic harpsichordist composer named Diego Sanchez Hasa. He wrote a 20+ minute long setting of the Song of Songs that was altered a little bit. It was in Spanish. And the ensemble that was decided on was flute, clarinet, classical guitar, and percussion battery, which became a lot of interesting options, a lot of cool sounds that you can get out of that combination. So that was the first piece. The second piece was by a really wonderful American composer named James Ogburn. He's a composition professor at Columbus State University in Georgia. And he wrote the theme of the entire show was erotic opera. So he wrote a really sort of tongue-in-cheek, kind of a dirty, funny, little small 8-minute intermezzo piece that allowed me to improvise a little bit. Had a really cool sort of pitch constellation thing going on. And then the third piece was a piece I've done several times, and it's the piece that really launched me into singing seriously. It's by Girolamo Duraco. It's called 8 Songs for a Drag Queen. It's an homage piece to the Peter Maxwell Davies piece, 8 Songs for a Mad King. So it's super difficult, super virtuosic. I guess it's 30+ minutes long for countertenor trombonist. So it's funny, you get the tenor word in the middle, countertenor trombonist. So it's tenor trombone. He loves puns. He's a very pun-based guy. So yeah, so that was the whole show, and it was sold out. We got a really awesome review from an opera publication in Italy. It was kind of my first real
David, that's wonderful. Congratulations. But how did you travel? How was traveling after this pandemic? Because you are as a US citizen, so people would love to know how is the situation? How are you able to go there with American passport?
Yeah. So the Delta Airlines has something called COVID-free flights. So it's possible, but it is difficult and costly. So you have to show up at JFK Airport with a negative PCR test. Then they do a rapid test at the airport, and then you fill out a lot of paperwork for the EU. Then you get on the plane and you fly over. As soon as you land in Milan, they test you again a third time. And only then are you allowed into the country.
Even if you are vaccinated, even when you are vaccinated, even.
They actually never ask to see that. They don't care if you're vaccinated or not. They care if you're carrying it currently. So I can say that there was like a 0% chance that anybody on that flight was spreading anything. So, because the testing was so rigorous. So then I needed a 4th test to go into the theater to do the show and rehearse with the ensemble. And then I needed a 5th test to enter back into the US. So it was
very complicated.
It was complicated, but it happened. It worked. I mean, you can't stay stagnant forever. So,
But what do you think, David, about the online concerts? Last year, there were a lot of concerts happening virtually, also festivals. So did you participate? And what do you think about this idea about virtual world and virtual concerts?
yeah, it could open up. I'm glad that it's like a whole new avenue of performing opportunities and like a whole new way to reach audiences. Like something really beneficial that comes to mind is giving the opportunity to have a live concert experience to people who maybe didn't have so much access before. I mean, before the pandemic, really one of the only virtual concert experiences that was regularly available was the Met Opera streams. And those weren't exactly cheap, but they were excellent productions. But now, I mean, think about people who maybe live, far away from big population centers who don't have access to seeing a lot of live shows. Now it's becoming very standard, very typical to offer a stream of everything that's going on in person, and I think that's fantastic. I did a number of little sort of like COVID edition performances. An ensemble that I'm in the city called the Curiosity Cabinet. We did a video production of Three Penny Opera with Whitney George, who's a wonderful composer, conductor.
Yes.
We did, what else did I do? My trombone quartet, it's called So Wrong It's Right. We did a special performance of a new piece by Sandeep Bhagwati for a music notation conference in Hamburg. And then I did, every week or two, I would have another kind of remote recording project. I recorded something for Pittsburgh Opera.
Oh, that's great. Pittsburgh Opera,
yeah, all sorts of different little things. But getting back to performing live in front of people that's the best. that's what I like the most. So.
But David, I also want to ask you, because last year you issued your album, right? Okay,
yeah.
Album. Yeah, so that was before the pandemic happened, right? What was the story about the album?
Yeah, it's sort of it's a collection of pieces that I was sort of hired out to record as a soloist over the years, and then for each one I kind of negotiated a way to where I could release it myself, so I could have a collection of my solo work. And because of working in that way, I was able to put out music of a production value that I could never ever afford otherwise. For example, there's a full concerto with the Orchestra Pomeranian Musicali, great engineers, great microphones, great performers, and sort of the main concert hall in Milan. I could never afford that just as a trombone soloist. It's just not possible. So there's a really wonderful big band concerto with the Eco Music Big Band. And then there's some smaller solo pieces, and it all kind of came together. I need to do a better job of promoting it. I'm like a lot of performers. I'm sort of allergic to self-promotion, but it's been pretty well received so far, and I'm sure if I make more of an effort to get it in front of people, I'll get even more decent feedback about it. But yeah, it's a difficult and costly endeavor to put out a solo record, but I think it's a worthwhile one because it gives you a context and a document to share with the world, really who you are and what you're doing. So.
But David, you have this recording of the Milo Concerto, right? Is it also part of the album? Yes.
It is. Yeah. The Darius Milhaud Concerto is a piece that I've worked on and off for many years. It's the piece that I won the Manhattan School of Music Concerto competition with, years ago, and then I decided to re-record it with piano and a drum kit. The drum kit is not kosher, not canon. I had a wonderful jazz drummer named Connor Parks, and we gave him the piano score, and he quasi-improvised and just sort of reinforced hits and just played time throughout the entire piece, and it came together really well. I think that Mio would be
Please.
really quite. I think he would be pleased. He would be pleased. At MSM, when we tried to add a drum kit, the Mio estate told us, no, don't do that. If you do that, we're going to take our parts back. But
you know, the question is, because originally this is for orchestra and trombone, right? Original that you perform also at the Manhattan School of Music.
String orchestra, right? Yeah.
Yes. So then there is a score reduction for the piano, yes, and the percussion part. But the percussion part is always tricky because which part should it play? The real percussion from the orchestra, or maybe it should add, because there are a lot of different things that you can use as entrances of the instruments. And then just having the drum set is really unusual and very difficult task. Actually, I think it's a very difficult task.
It is, yeah. So we're really fortunate that Mio himself made the piano reduction.
Yeah,
that's published that we used. And then just given the jazzy tinge that Mio was playing with at the time, I think putting a modern jazz drummer into the mix was I think it worked. I think it was appropriate. I mean, the trombone orthodoxy is going to really not like it. But actually, a lot of people who I assumed would hate it have actually given me some pretty positive feedback about it. But yeah, I mean, everybody can have a listen to it.
Yes, at the end of our interview, I will play it. You know, I will show this recording. Also, you did a great video I was watching before. So this also recording has like a video clip that people can see you walking in New York, also with the dancer, with choreography. So it's like a multimedia kind of presentation of this work with the video.
Yeah.
We'll play it.
Great. Yeah, a good friend of mine, Paul Notice. He's a wonderful filmmaker. Their girlfriend, Katrina Reed, is also a wonderful dancer, and we put it together. And Paul wound up playing or directing the entire visual album. So there's an interesting dance video to go along with each piece on the album. So go to Bandcamp, check it out.
That's wonderful. We'll see it. But you know, now we are talking about also the repertoire for the trombone. And I want to ask you, David, your experience working with new pieces. Well, Milo, of course, is a little bit older, but how do you prepare working on the new pieces? What you are expecting the new piece to be? And what is important for you? And what do you think about the new repertoire for the trombone? From your perspective as a performer, also working with the jazz and the new music. So I would like to know your opinion about that.
Yeah, for me, the most important aspect of working in new music is a close, tight personal relationship with the composer and having a good working understanding and just really very open lines of communication with the composer. Because I think that the future is individualized and not standardized music. I think that much more interesting results come about when a composer can really dial in to the particular idiosyncrasies of an individual performer rather than writing a blanket piece or I think that writing for a universal concept of an instrument is actually anything but universal. It's quite restricting, because perhaps a performer can do all sorts of things and all sorts of really wonderful sounds and ideas can be drawn out of a performer. But if the performer is just treated as a stock instrument, then I think you're leaving a lot of expression and a lot of possibilities on the table. So for me, individualizing solo works, at least, I realize that, it's not practical to get to know, 60 performers of an orchestra individually. That's not practical.
Orchestra is so different. Orchestra is completely different word. Orchestra.
Totally different. Yeah, it's a fully different task.
Different.
Sure.
Different planet.
Totally different planet. Yeah. But beyond that, I really love to sit down with composers and really play for them and just sit down and improvise for them or with them if they perform on something themselves. And a lot of really interesting ideas can come out of that. So for example, I love to play the reed trombone, which is sort of a thing that sort of exists and sort of doesn't exist. So I have a customized alto saxophone mouthpiece that I seat inside of the trombone mouthpiece.
I know, you showed me that, I remember.
It's a really wonderful sound world. It's totally different. And you know, all the solo repertoire that, you know, is sort of part of the trombone canon just totally ignores this really cool possibility, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And also just an individual performer is always going to have 1,000 tricks up their sleeve, and being able to exploit those, I think, is going to bring art music to a whole new audience, and it's going to develop a lot more interest. Whereas just treating an instrument as, you know, just a box of set possibilities is you know, I just think it's a bit limiting. But yeah, so after you know, developing a good working relationship and then really exploring all the sounds that can be made, at that point in the process, the composer goes into their hole and they work it out. So with this piece, with Joel, it was already, you know, it was a pre-composed piece. I wasn't.
I mean, competition was also different, because the competition, you had to judge the pieces that are already composed, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That was.
So that was completely different. Completely different task. Not your style way of thinking about the music, right? But you did recording of the Full Moon with the Oliveira, right? Pedro Oliveira. Yes.
Yeah.
So that was a very different one. But you also have consultations with the composer while recording.
Oh, of course. Yeah. And he's firstly, he's an excellent composer. And secondly, he's of a mindset that allows a performer a good bit of latitude to move and shape the piece. So I'm actually quite happy with you know, I might perform that piece again. It's a very difficult piece. It is.
Great job, David. Everyone can see on the channel ours. Also vote.
Oh, really?
Voting chart. So everyone who is watching, also we have a voting charts for the horn, trombone, trumpet, and saxophone. So everyone can vote. Only one vote from one email. But you can see it is called the Full Moon, and it's recorded by David just recently. You can see on the channel a piece that we are talking about now.
Vote for me.
But
no, it's a great piece, and it's written very idiosyncratically, but at the same time, you know, there's some pretty huge technical challenges to that piece. So like it was, and also that was another piece that was it was a real hell of a way to come back to performing with something so difficult
after
like that.
quarantine, after so many months rest, right?
Very much, yeah. But I'm really happy that that piece actually got me in really good shape to sort of, you know, jump back into work. So it was it all came out very well, and now we're talking about you know, some future projects possibly. So yeah,
that's great. That's
it worked out.
Yeah. But David, also I want to ask you about your opinion about the tradition also of the old music, because we don't have so many pieces for trombones, of course. If we're going to talk about the classical time, right? We have this baroque, but there was a different instruments. And about the trombone, mostly is a modern word, right? But your way of also thinking about the trombone, because you use different techniques, different way of exploring the instrument. How do you approach the music written like in the many years ago? Yes. Do you also enjoy it? Do you teach, and do you have students? Do you give them this kind of music? Do you teach, David?
I actually don't teach at all.
You don't teach. Oh, but you have master classes. I could see you have a lot of master classes, David.
Yeah. I do some master classes, just sort of on a like an individual sort of engagement kind of basis. And I
How do you do that?
Well, for master classes and just, I guess the overarching idea for me when approaching music from the past is, if you were to look at the performance history of a piece, when you put something onto the record as a performance of a piece, you should be contributing to the development of that piece. You should not be going back to the first person who performed that piece and trying to copy what they've done. You should do the work and try to contribute something to the expansion and the perception of that piece. So for example, I did the Mozart bassoon concerto with the
That's
Budapest
interesting.
Symphony.
Yes. So how about this?
Yeah, so I did it some years ago with the Budapest Symphony Orchestra MÁV. It's there's an orchestra that's sponsored by like the National Train Service in Hungary, and they
Hungary,
have
great orchestras, wonderful city, wonderful country.
wonderful orchestras. Yeah,
Wonderful,
it's one of I think 7 full-time orchestras in Budapest.
Wonderful. Yes.
So when I approach a piece like that, trying to play it in a historically accurate manner, well, I mean that's out the window before I even start, right? Because firstly, my instrument's wrong. Okay, so doing a historically accurate version of it, that ship has sailed. That's gone. So now it's our task to look at the piece and say, okay, it's, you know, whatever year it is. I think it was 2016, 2017, something like that. So it's our job to look at the piece and say, okay, it is this year now. The world is the way it is right now. We need to contribute to the development of this piece, right? So I did what I think was a kind of a fun job with it. I did a pretty interesting improvised cadenza. I did some kind of modern inflected, so a little bit of jazz inflected interpretations of a lot of the lines in there. And I think for better or worse, maybe some people like it, maybe some people hate it, but for better or worse, I put something new onto the history of that piece that gets played, you know, a zillion times a year. And I think that even if somebody fails at doing something great with a piece of old music, I think that trying something new is far more important than playing it safe and trying to do it the way that somebody else has already done it.
Okay.
And yeah.
That's okay. Thank you very much, David, for sharing this. Also, this also gives us the idea that we can use the transcriptions of the same concertos. Maybe Mozart would write for the trombone. You know, many modern composers. I'm thinking about also great composers nowadays. They have few versions of the same concerto. It happens, and they rearrange it. So actually, you play the rearrangement. I'm very curious. Who did the rearrangement? Did you do by yourself or special composer rearrange for trombone?
Of the Mozart?
Yes, of the Mozart.
Oh no, I played the original version.
Ah, so original version, but there might be some problem with some notes, for example, that you might not have on the trombone, right?
Right. So because of the difficulties, a whole new way of looking at the piece and a whole new result comes out because, and maybe it wasn't Mozart's intention, but you know what? Mozart's not going to say a word about it. And we all know why. It's because he's dead. So I have respect for the dead, but we don't need to keep living as though they're in the room. Just put it that way. Beethoven's not in the room. Do something interesting with Beethoven.
But Beethoven was very open-minded. He wouldn't mind. He would go completely different nowadays. He would think very different, and he would be going with the extremes of the things that he is for his time. So because he was doing for extreme for his time, so nowadays he would do very different because there are different extremes.
Of course, yeah. And also, when we're making art, I don't think it's a good practice to ask the opinion of ghosts, because you're not going to get a lot of response. Another way I like to look at it is if Mozart were to come back from the dead somehow and walk into a rehearsal, concert hall, and walk into a rehearsal of his own music. And if he were to hear some of the discussions that were happening where performers and conductors would be arguing and quibbling and saying, oh, but I think originally in Leipzig they would have done it like this, and I think that in the Habsburg court I think they would have done it like this. I think Mozart would be furious about that. He would say, how many hundreds of years have you had to do something new, and now you're trying to provide some sort of weird historical cosplay using my music? Come on, like, do something new, do something interesting. Like, yes, it's great that you're playing music from the past, but do something new with it.
So you are going to this world, but you are coming from a different time, from the 21st century, and you are coming and you just want to say hi to those people. Hey, my David,
Yeah.
I just want to say hi to you. You are around the orchestra, but I'm David. I'm from the 21st century. Hi.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what cool conversations could you have as a 21st century person speaking with somebody back then? And that's really fun to watch. Even though, it gets translated, through the instruments, it becomes a very subtle and very difficult thing to understand. But, making that conversation with the past rather than trying to completely reproduce what's happened in the past. Now,
Okay, I got it. Yes.
Yeah, there's a really cool field of historical performance, but really, like, how far can you really take it, right? So, like, if you're trying to be historically correct with your instrument, that's just a guess. But, like, how, where do you stop with it? Like, did you use a toilet that morning? Because they didn't have toilets. Did you drive there in a car? They didn't have cars. What are you doing? It's not accurate, So it's
you need to act. You need to act. You have to be actor. Who has to act.
Yeah.
Pretend that you live in this world where you don't live in.
Yeah, there's no small amount of suspension of disbelief to sort of get into that practice. But just generally, I'm just very much on the side of looking at music from the past and seeing what we can contribute to it, rather than sort of doing kind of a weird necrophilia thing with composers' corpses,
So, that's very interesting. Well, thank you very much for this, David. So I think it would be a good time to finish the conversation and listen this Milo concerto with this video that we just discussed. People can see what you are also doing regarding this drum set, new arrangement. They can hear what we actually discuss. And I want to say thank you very much, David, for judging, for premiering this piece, Full Moon, on our YouTube channel, for this conversation. And I wish you have a great year, a lot of great concerts, a lot of inspirations, a lot of wonderful experience also with opera and also with the trombone world. And I hope everything will get better. It seems to look like it's going to get better.
Slowly.
Yes,
Yeah.
Hopefully. And so thank you very much, David, for this conversation. And we are now listening to your recording of the Milo concerto from your recent OK album. Have a great day.
Okay, trombone. Yeah, great. Thank you, Jakub.
Thank you, David. Let's
later.
listen. All the best
Ciao,
for you.
man.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.